You don't often get things perfectly right the first time you try something, but could Skoda have managed it with the Kodiaq? That's what we've set out to find at the beginning of our 6-month test of this brand new model. In fact, it represents a number of firsts for the company. It's Skoda's first big SUV for a start, and its first 7-seater. It's also the first Skoda that I've tested on a long-term basis. And not only have my family and I pressed it into service as our everyday family ferry, it's also been my regular work car, and it's taken us on holiday. My colleagues have helped us pile on the miles too, with trips as far afield as the Alps and southern France. When we started this test, perhaps the biggest question was just whether the Kodiaq would live up to our expectations. You see, in June, just before I took delivery of this car, the Kodiaq won the title of the best car launched in the last 12 months at the first Auto Trader New Car Awards. I didn't disagree with that decision, but I will admit that when I first drove the Kodiaq, I wasn't quite as impressed as some of my colleagues. So I was really looking forward to spending more time with one and getting to know it better. Now those 6 months are at an end though, and it's time to look back and see just how good this Kodiaq was. If there's one thing you need in a family car, it's space, and in the Kodiaq you get it by the bucket load. I'm over 6 foot tall and there's loads of room for me here in the front, and there's just as much in the row behind, which is great whether we're getting our daughter in and out or giving a lift to friends. I haven't actually used the car as a 7-seater, but my colleagues have, and they've also been really impressed. What we've all loved is the boot space, and this car has been packed to the gunnels on several occasions. My family went to Centre Parks, one colleague went on a cycling holiday to Cornwall, and another drove 3 friends to the Alps for a spot of mountaineering. But everything we wanted has always fitted in, and with room to spare. If you're an iPhone user like me and haven't had the joy of using Apple CarPlay, you haven't lived. Once you've paired your phone up to the car, you can operate most of its important features either through the touchscreen or through voice control. For me, the most important thing has been the ability to play my own choice of music from my phone, but I also love the way the system can read out a text if it arrives while you're driving, and then allow you to dictate a reply and send it, just using voice control.
Your reply to Anne says, "Yeah, all good so far, thank you. Ready to send it?"
Myself and my colleagues have driven thousands of miles in this car, not just in the UK but across Europe too, and we've all come back with the same opinion, that this is a great car for covering long distances in. On the motorway it's quiet and comfortable, and this high driving position gives you a great view of everything that's happening all around you. And on top of that, there's loads of room in the rear seats for anyone there to stretch out. Now I know it's a bit unfair to criticise a car that's big on the inside for being big on the outside, but hey, life's not fair. The trouble is, I spend a lot of my time in and around town, and the sheer size of the Kodiaq can be a problem, particularly when parking. My colleagues have struggled with the same problem too, and Phil also found that when he was in Cornwall, the high hedges down those narrow lanes soon sent the emergency braking system into meltdown. It's not just the sheer size of the car that causes a problem, it's also the fact that you don't get a very good view out, and particularly to the rear. There are some really big expanses of metalwork around those rear windows, and that restricted view can make it really hard to judge where the edges of the car are. I have to give the engine quite a lot of revs to get this car to pull away from rest as quickly as I'd like, and when I do that, the engine gets really quite noisy. It's something I notice particularly around town when I'm stopping and starting all the time. From talking to Skoda, we know that when we went through the online configurator and trawled the brochures to specify our car, what we ended up with is something that's really typical of cars that actually leave the showrooms. For instance, just over half of Kodiaq buyers choose a diesel engine, and the most popular one is the one that I've chosen in my car, the 2-litre TDI 150. However, what I have done that's a bit different is to choose a manual gearbox rather than the GSG gearbox, and that's something that less than a third of buyers do. I went for the optional brilliant silver metallic paintwork, but much to my surprise, that's not one of the biggest sellers. In fact, the slightly darker quartz grey is the most popular, followed by petrol blue and moon white. Skoda tells us that more than 3/4 of buyers go for one of the top 2 trim levels, But like almost 40% of buyers, we've chosen the most popular trim level. This car comes with SEL trim, which is one of the highest in the Kodiaq range, so that means it comes with lots of desirable kit as standard. That includes a touchscreen infotainment system, dual zone climate control and Alcantara upholstery. There are 4 options fitted to the car, but there's only one that I'd actually recommend. That's the brilliant silver metallic paint, which really smartens up the way this car looks and works really well with the chrome pack that's also standard with this trim. The result, to my eyes at least, is a car that looks much more expensive than it actually is. Generally, I'm pretty happy with the specification of this car, and there are only a couple of other options I wish I'd fitted. The first is adaptive cruise control, which adjusts the car's speed to control the distance between it and the car in front. And the second is the children's pack that adds roller blinds for the rear windows and an electric child lock. Each is pretty cheap and seem well worth the money. You might be quite tempted by the panoramic sunroof and the camera system that gives a good all-round view when you're parking, but you're looking at a 4-figure sum for either, and I think that's a bit too steep. At the start of this film, I said the biggest challenge for the Kodiaq would just be living up to our expectations. And to cut a long story short, it hasn't done that. No, in fact, it's far exceeded our expectations. And what our 6 months together have shown me is that this isn't just a good family car, this is one of the very, very best. Between myself and my colleagues, we've made lots of demands of the Kodiaq, but it's come up trumps every time. Just think of anything you could want from a family car, whether it's space, practicality or a good drive, and this thing gives it to you. The more time I spend with this car, the more I come to appreciate it. The more I notice little things about it and think, wow, that's clever. And the end result is that after 6 months of living with this thing, I would have absolutely no hesitation in recommending this to anyone who's looking for a family car.